Alrighty, welcome to Supernatural Signals, my haunted journal edition. If you're new here, this is my haunted journal where I casually yap about what's going on in my life, especially anything supernatural I'm experiencing. I also share channel updates, everyday life with my boyfriend nicknamed Kermie, and thoughts on things in the media like true crime, though the supernatural is usually the main focus. On this channel, you'll find three types of content: this haunted journal series, short mini mysteries, which you can find over my shorts tab, and longer investigative deep dive videos. All right, so usually what I do to start off these videos is I kind of chit chat about things that I'm playing, watching, reading, all that stuff, entertainment wise, just chatting about my life. Um, there's not much to update because my last one was very content heavy. I think for like more than half of the podcast, I was yapping about things I've been watching. Since then, Kermie and I've just been watching some YouTube and uh I've been playing this game called Killer Frequency, which I should have the second part out um probably with either tonight or like within the next few days. So I'm really enjoying playing that game. It's a lot of fun. And yeah, so I will be posting some more of that today or in the next few days, like I said. And then um today we're gonna jump in. The only thing I want to talk about is I am getting really excited for Halloween. Um, I think that's like the funnest holiday. I really do. I love Christmas as well and just other holidays in general. But Halloween, I just feel like it's just a fun holiday. People don't have to like think about sad things. Like it's just fun and they can do what they want. Like they can either watch movies or dress up or party or whatever. It's like a very like there's not like a lot of pressure, right? Like it's like I don't know, it's like what you want to do and you don't have to like spend a crap ton of money if you don't want to, or you can go do like the fun like it's very like customized, you know what I mean? And I feel like some holidays are very pressure filled where it's like I got to do this with this family, I got to do this with this. The Halloween's just fun, right? And obviously I love the decorations and the vibes and everything, and Spirit Halloween is like getting all the stuff out and I'm like super excited about that. One of the reasons I want my own house, my own dwelling, is I can decorate it with, having proper resources and being able to decorate it and just do what I want to do with it. And really looking forward to that one day because it seems a lot of fun to decorate and all that stuff. So, but let's move on. What we're going to do is going to be a little different. Like I said, we're going to jump in right into the main topic where I kind of discussed last video and the video before. Finally, we're going to get into what is called the Moonlight Killers. And long story short, it's basically I came across it by feeling like I was being haunted in my home for the past year because we live, a lake is behind us, and I thought that was a source of like all these little hauntings, which again, you can go back. I'm not going to repeat them here. All these like random hauntings, right? And I thought the lake might have been the source or one of the reasons. And by doing that, I was Googling like haunted lakes in my area. And then I came across this story, and that's how I came to it. So I was like, well, maybe the universe is trying to tell me to at least investigate it and see what it is. And maybe I could learn something about it. Obviously, I'm not going to solve a cold case because it is a cold case. But I think it's just interesting to start delving into those things. And yeah, so today we're going to kind of do a background of it. And then maybe I'll visit some of the spots that some of the murders occurred and see what happens there. I doubt we'll get anything, but I'm just going to, like I said, Buddy's very intuitive and very sensitive to supernatural things as well as just humans' emotions. So I kind of want to take him there and just see him sniff around. We won't be there long. We're not going to do anything crazy, but I don't know. I think I'm going to do that for one of my next videos. So first, let's just focus on the background. And then at the end, I do have some small paranormal updates that I've been experiencing, but we'll save that to the end so I have more energy to talk about what I'm supposed to be talking about. All right, let's get into the background of the Moonlight Killers. Okay, so let's start by getting into. Sorry, Buddy, the co-host, is with me right now. Um, but let's get into the background of the case and kind of the environment. So this happened in Texarkana in 1946 in a span of 10 weeks. Um, I'm sorry, guys. I can't record without my dog. Like, it's just something that he won't allow. So it's just a thing. All right. All right. So let's get into, like I said, kind of the background. Um, so there were 8 people that were attacked, and 5 of those sadly passed away. And we're going to get into each one of those attacks. Okay, so back then, it's good to know, not even just back then, but even today, Texarkana is is unusual because it's essentially one community divided into 2 states. So there's Texas and Arkansas with separate government and law informant inform enforcement jurisdictions. So there's like basically it's like one city, and I think they share like a postal area, but like everything else is like different cops, different police, like it's a different entity, right? And the area was emerging from World War II in relatively strong economic shape. So even though there was probably a lot of racial tensions and a lot of stuff going on as far as like rebuilding, trying to get back to our normal life, and like I said, unjustifiable racial tensions right after the war. The place was kind of um, 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 it was like rebuilding, right? So it wasn't like as bad as some areas, but it was like rebuilding, right? The Red River Army Depot and Lone Star ammunition facilities that helped revive the local economy during the war. So they did have jobs. And Texarkana is also an important railroad hub. So by the late 1940s, 4 major railroad systems connected through the city. So it is a railroad city. And then agriculture, timber, and other industries were important to the surrounding regions. So it wasn't like a ghost town, right? Like it's not like how like I grew up in Texas, not in Texarkana. I keep that in mind. Like I have only been living here for about a year, um, but I did grow up in Texas, and a lot of my friends like from back in the day, like some of them came from like really really small towns where literally there would just be like a light. It wasn't like that. Like it was I think it had like a population. Each side had like 20,000 people. So each side had a solid population of like 40,000, which is actually probably more than it is today. Keep that in mind. So, like I said, it's not a town that's from me living here. It's not like Dallas. It's not like a big city town, right? It's structurally sound. There's movement and things like that. There's shopping. There's restaurants, but it's definitely not somewhere where you're like, want to come visit Texarkana? Like it's just like a suburb area that has some shopping, and it's not. It's it's thriving on its own, right? And I feel like that's kind of like how it was in the late 1940s, but kind of rebuilding. And like I said, some maybe tensions. And I do know back in the 1940s, there was a lot of high crime rates. So they were kind of used to crimes, but in certain areas, right? So it wasn't like, walking down in Detroit or something like that, but there was still for a smaller town and stuff like that, they would see things on the news. So keep that in mind too, that seeing crime wasn't like the biggest thing, but it also like wasn't running people out of the town as bad as it could be, right? That's from my understanding from my research of what was going on here. Um, so they're kind of like rebuilding, like most probably everyone was, and there was crime, but again, not enough to like make people want to evacuate the town, right? Now, keep in mind, like like when you watch those 1950s movies, like there wasn't where like or those styles in the 1950s where they have like makeout lane or something like that. They did a lot of that back then. I'm assuming because there wasn't a lot to do, there wasn't a lot of privacy. It's a lot of open forested areas, and so I think like people would go park and enjoy each other's company as young adults or teens or whatever, and so that's also where a lot of these killings took place, which I wouldn't be surprised if that inspired a lot of movies, right? And also keep in mind this is dubbed the Moonlight Killers, but if you're looking into this case, they also call it the Phantom Killer as well. So he has like 2 names. Um, there is a lot before we get into more of the details. As I'm researching this stuff, there's a lot of contradicting online. I'm trying to go with the best that I can, like, finding one source and then double checking it, but I'm not going to be perfect. Like, this case seems to be like very, people took a lot of liberties with it after, it was all said and done and kind of, expelled on it. So we're trying to keep it into the facts, but there's a lot of like information that might that isn't very clear. Let's put it that way, and a lot of different things. So I'm going to try my best to keep it as accurate as possible, but I just want to put that little disclaimer out as well. So the first killing happened in February 22nd, 1946. Now, reminder, this goes on for 10 weeks. So it was February 22nd, 1946, and it was Jimmy Hollis and Mary Jeanne Larry. Um, this is the first attributed attack. Thankfully, it wasn't a murder, but this was the first attack. It what did happen around 11:45. Jim Hollis and Mary at night. Jimmy Hollis and Mary Jeanne Larry had been out together and eventually parked in a secluded road in Bowie County. And that is when a man supposedly approached them carrying a gun. And most famously, Larry described him as having his face concealed beneath a light colored cloth or a sack with opening cuts into it. He forced the couple from the vehicle. Hollis was brutally beaten with the gun, suffering serious skull injuries. The attacker then pursued Larry and assaulted her with a weapon. And a passing vehicle apparently frightened the attacker away, and thankfully, both survived. So, and this was again occurred in Lover's Lane, which is about very close, like 300 feet from a row of city homes, which is now our Central Mall. So I guess back then they had homes, and it's now the mall in our area. Um, and so this was like only 10 minutes into the attack. Um, and yeah, it's very sad, but thankfully they survived and they were able to get a description of him. Um, Now, a little bit more details on this specific attack. Now, keep in mind, the way they did escape was that after Larry saw an old car, and so she like ran towards it, but it was empty. Which now people are thinking that was the actual killer's car, because why would it be empty, right? So they, found the car there. So some people assumed that might have been the killer's car, right? And then that's when she was assaulted by him, because he asked her why she was running, and then she said, because you told me to, and then he said he was a liar, and then he knocked her down and assaulted her with the barrel of his gun. And then she fled on foot and ran half a mile to a nearby house, and they were able to call the police. And then Hollis was able to regain consciousness, and then that's when he saw the passing motorcycle, who also assisted. And then that's when the Bowie County Sheriff, W.H. Bill Presley, and 3 other officers arrived at the scene, but that's when the assailant already left. And they all recovered from their injuries. So that's in a nutshell. Keep in mind, there's just different descriptions of the attackers, but I feel like you can't like blame them because they're terrified. But so you're not really thinking straight. But Larry claimed that she could see under the mask was a light-skinned African American male, and then Hollis alternately claimed that the attacker was a tanned white man, around 30 years old. But he couldn't see much because he was blinded with a flashlight. So again, that's what they're saying. That's what I'm seeing online. So that's the first attack. So they were alive, and they were able to kind of give some kind of description, but like I said, it's hard to tell at night when you're getting attacked and you're scared out of your mind. So next we're going to move into the first double murder, and that was March 24th. So about a month after the first attack. Now, this couple have been only dating for like 6 weeks, and it was Richard Griffin, 29, and Polly Ann Moore, who was 17. And again, they were found in another secluded row in Bowie County, apparently not too far off from the previous attacks. And as I said earlier, this time nobody survived. Both were shot in the back of the head, and this time the weapon was a .32 caliber firearm. Wasn't the same attack, obviously, but they were assaulted as well. So keep that in mind. So same MO as far as um, being assaulted, but this time they were shot and they were left in their car. Okay, so guys, this is another reason why this case is difficult to report on. Just before we continue on, they are saying that some people are saying that Polly Ann Moore was assaulted in more ways than physically, like uh, essayed, and some saying are not. So keep that in mind, and we don't know if she was, but either way, the way she passed away wasn't right. So people are kind of like iffy about that. But basically, Griffin, so Richard Griffin was, they were both found in the car. Griffin was his. So Richard was found in the front seats and his pockets were turned out. And then Moore was found in the back seats. But they think that they were shot outside of the car. So not necessarily inside the car, but like apparently they feel like they were shot in the back of the head and they were both closed. So again, because there was blood found out of the side of the car, that's basically the roundabout way of saying that they were shot outside the car and then they were placed inside. I don't know why. Maybe the killer thought that it would be harder to find them and give them more time to run away. Not sure, but also keep in mind this was only like 100 yards from Lovers Lane, which is kind of like brave of him. Not brave, obviously, like disgusting, but like it was also like the audacity of him to do it like right in the same area that he just did that, not even like barely a month ago, right? And so um now remember, so keep in mind there's no DNA. This is 1946. So there's no DNA, there's no cell phone records, no surveillance cameras. Like nowadays it's so hard to get away for murder because there's just none of that stuff, and no computerized criminal databases. I do wonder if they kept the DNA to test now. I don't know if they were thinking about that back then. But yeah. Uh and like I said, they were, so the police basically only had witnesses, fingerprints, ballistics, and physical evidence and interviews. So it was all like old fashioned, knocking on doors, casing the places, and that's all they had to rely on, right? And then on April 14th, so less than a month after the killings, like 3 weeks after the killings, a second double murder occurred. And these kids were even like younger. Okay, so as I'm asking myself these questions, because I can do the research beforehand, but like also like when I'm speaking out loud, it makes me like want to like question more things. And so I just Googled real quick, did they actually take samples? Because I know I watch crimes where, that happened in, or I don't, like in the 90s and things like that, where they didn't have the forensic testing yet. And then they were able to do it nowadays. I checked it. They didn't keep any DNA analysis. So there was no fingerprints, no weapons, and no biological evidence. So back then, I mean, there wasn't much to go on, and then they didn't think about keeping any DNA swabs and things like that because they probably just didn't even think of the stuff that we can do now, right? All right. So continuing on to the third attack. Now we have Paul Martin and Betty Jo Booker. And this is when everything starts coming, like people start getting really scared. This is kind of like the climax and where they start, I guess, identifying him as a serial killer and things like that. Because the previous one, keep in mind, there wasn't the same type of kill, right? They shot him. There was a lot of differences in the first attack. And I guess maybe the first attack was his first attack, so he had first attack jitters, if you want to say it bluntly. Like he probably just didn't carry it out as the way he planned, right? And so as the killings went on, he probably got more and more bold, right? And so Paul Martin was only 16 and Betty Jo Booker was 15, and she played saxophone in a band. And so basically she was performing that night at a place called VFW Club, which I'm going to go check real quick to see if that place still exists. Okay, it does still exist. It looks like it's kind of not like a nightclub type vibe, but like for events and thing. And but this is nowadays, right? So just a quick thing. It doesn't look like there's going to be like a lot of rowdiness happening there. Let's put it that way. But it still exists. So that's that. But she was performing there, and she was picked up by Paul. Um, and then later on, Paul was found at 6:30 a.m. later that morning, lying on his left side at North Park Road. Um, he has been shot 4 times in his hand, through his back. It looks like he was running, it seems like, because apparently his body was found on the other side of the road by a fence, and blood was found on the other side. So it looks like he was trying to run away from whoever was attacking him. And then Booker's body was found at 11:30, 2 miles away from Martin's body, and she was found behind a tree, lying on her back, fully closed. And it was posed actually with her right hand in the pocket of the button overcoat. So that's interesting. It was posed with a right hand in the pocket of the buttoned overcoat. That's very weird. I don't know what's the killer's obsession with pockets. Booker had been shot twice, once through the chest and once in the face. Um, the weapon used was the same as the first. So this is when they start picking up, like I said, that this is a serial killer. Um, their bodies, the car that they were driving in when they left the place was about 1.5 miles away from Martin's body, and then from Booker's bodies, it was about 3 miles, and they still had the key in the ignition by Spring Lake. And as you know, this is where all my thoughts processes started coming to this. So this is the place that I'm going to go explore. They do say there's supernatural activity. Now, I want to make something very clear. When I Googled spooky things by lakes in Texarkana, I found a thing that said um that Betty Joe was hung, and like all these things happened to her by the tree and was assaulted. I don't think a lot of that is true from what I'm reading. I'm looking at Wiki, I'm looking at other sources, like other articles and things like that, and they're all kind of saying the same things. That thing I think was just people exaggerating for the spookiness aspect of it. But I'm still going to go check out that area, and I will probably check out the area around the mall that happened by Lover's Lane, and look into that area a little bit more. But yeah, I want to make that clear that it didn't seem like she was like used, like hung. They said in the supernatural thing that she was like hung by the tree while she was assaulted. I don't think that was true. And they said she was stabbed. I don't think she was stabbed. It looks like from all other accounts that she was shot. All right, so continuing on. So again, this happened April 14th. Now this is what we can start concluding, that like there was struggle with each thing. So it doesn't seem like the person was very professional, especially with the first attack. Um, and it seems like there was struggle for each of them. They didn't have like enemies from all accounts. No one had like enemies that were like, you owe me money or something like that. And then it seems like I said, from what we're getting, there were struggles. Now, the weird thing is, I don't know why he liked to turn out pockets and put someone's hands in the pockets. I don't know. I noticed that with things with the details that for 2 cases now, there was weird things with pockets. I don't know if I don't know. Serial killers are weird. Obviously, they got issues. So let's keep investigating. Now, on May 3rd, 1946, we have the attacks of Virgil and Katie Starks. Now, this one is interesting because Virgil was killed and Katie was shot, but she survived. So let's get into a little bit of their details. It was around like 9 o'clock. It was like in the evening. And they were a little older than the younger couple. So they weren't out like, doing the things on the side of the road. They were 37 and 36. Katie was 36. And they were this was on the Arkansas side of town. So keep that in mind. And they were, they had like a farm home, right? And apparently Virgil was sitting at home and he was reading. the newspaper, and he was shot twice in the back of his head from a window. So he literally just got shot and pinpointed. It wasn't like an attack, it was just shooting through the window. Katie came to see what was the ruckus, and saw Virgil stand and slump back and pass away. Then she ran to a telephone to call the police and rang twice before being shot in the face from the same window. And she fell and then tried to get a pistol from another room, but wasn't able to do it because she was, bleeding and in pain. And yeah, she was shot in the face. So that's when she ran across the street to her, I believe her sister's house. And could you imagine being like shot in the face, seeing your husband dying, and then you're running from a man with your face bleeding, going for help? And then her sister wasn't even there. So she ran to a neighbor's house, and luckily her neighbors were able to assist. She just basically got to get out that Virgil was dead, and the neighbor came out with his own rifle and shot to get another neighbor's attention. Shot in the air to get another neighbor's attention. I guess that's how they communicated back in the day, and were able to get her to a hospital as quickly as possible. And treat her. And then the head of the case was able to ask her questions. Um, it was Sheriff W.E. Davis, and he questioned her in the operating room, which I guess like they just had to do that. And then questioned her about some rumors that were going on and things like that. That's the hardest part, probably being, well, not the hardest, but probably one of the most difficult investigating a case is all the rumors that come about, right? And everyone has their own truth and their own narrative. And I don't think most people are lying. They just might have seen something at a different time, or how things like that spread. And so just trying to like, get rid of all the what's rumors versus the facts, right? So, and they didn't have even forensics to go on back then. So that's kind of where we left it. So really sad case. Now we're gonna stop for a second, and kind of go into like what was going on. So this is kind of, because you can ask a few questions here. So it's like, was this even the same attack? Because it was a different gun that was used. This time it was a 22 caliber firearm rather than a 32. So we can ask, like, was he changing his method because people were catching on in the news and everything like that, and labeling him as the Phantom Killer and things like that. So he's like, I have to change the way I do things, or was it just not him at all? Because, like I said, there was some crime back then. So it wasn't, anything new to see stuff like that on the news, right? Or see it in the newspaper back then, right? So let's, and then as you know, so fear is starting to come into the whole city, right? And like I said, it's not a big city. Like where I'm living here now, it's not a big city. It's not a lot of places to go. It's small, right? It's it's fairly populated for its size, but it's not like very spread out. So obviously it's scary, and it could be your neighbors, it could be anybody, and they're doing these crimes, and it literally could be your neighbor. Like literally, it's not like New York City, where it still could be your neighbor, but the chances are very, very slim. In this scenario, it is not, right? So just keep that in mind as well, like how terrified people had to be home. Obviously don't go to Lover's Lane, don't go anywhere secluded. You have to stay at home. But then Virgil was at home. So it's like, where is safeness, right? It wasn't the Virgil attacks, and Katie's attack was way different because they were just at home reading, like, just doing their normal thing, right? It was the evening, they were winding down, like, I don't know. So this caused the area to be flooded with police. Now they took this very seriously. At the end of it, there were 47 officers working on the investigation by May 5th. Um, the Arkansas State Police sent additional officers, patrol cars, and mobile radio station to help coordinate the search. And then just nothing happened at the end. It just ceased to exist. I don't know, whoever did this just got scared and realized that one mistake could get him caught. Maybe he moved and started doing his chaos in other areas and continued doing crime that way. I don't know. I know in the 1940s you could get away with a lot more than you can nowadays. I really wish they kept some DNA or swabbed some things, but again, I don't think that was something they thought of doing back then. Um, and yeah, it just never got solved. Now there was a main suspect in this case. The main suspect was Yule Sweeney. And he was 29 years old, and he was pretty much known for stealing cars. That was actually the main reason why he gets arrested later on. But he did counterfeit and burglaries and car thieves. That was like his main thing. So he was already like on the police's radar. Um, but then his person that he was involved with named Peggy. Now, this is where, again, this is kind of confusing because I'm not sure if she married him right after the police, started questioning her, or like she was already married with them. That's kind of a blur. But I want to point that out because that's important to the story. But basically, they they find Peggy because what happened is that an officer named Max Tactic noticed something interesting. So he saw stolen automobiles. He noticed that stolen automobiles seemed to appear around the time of the murders. So that was, Yule's thing that he liked to do, steal cars. And so there was always stolen vehicles around the time of the murders, right? So that kind of coincided. And so that led so they basically conducted a stakeout involving the stolen vehicle, and that led them to Peggy. Okay. And she provided investigators with details about the killings, including information authorities believed that had not been publicly released and implicated Swinney. Um, and then the police were able to corroborate portions of what she told them. But then her story changed. And she married Sweeney in some stories. So it's like, since she married Sweeney, now she didn't have to testify against him because there's a law that states that you don't have to like testify against your husband, right? And that created serious evidentiary and legal problems. Investigators never developed enough physical evidence to prosecute him for the Phantom murder. So basically, she started being quiet after supposedly she married him. And then, like I said earlier, he went to prison for car theft and not the Moonlight murders, and he was never convicted as the Phantom. Um, so again, some investigators became convinced Swinney was their man, but they never proved it, so they were able to Al Capone him and get him on something else, right? Um, yeah, so I don't know. Again, there's a lot of like blurred things. Things weren't as documented as nowadays, so everything's kind of blur. And then obviously you have people that are into the supernatural, like myself, that maybe take it in a way that's not supposed to be um shown. So maybe she was always married to him and she just said all that stuff and then, decided to say, hey, I'm done talking because it's my husband, and she was able to enforce that right. Um, and thing, or she married him in order to continue protecting him. I don't know. And if he was a murderer, he probably threatened her, and so I don't blame her for keeping her mouth shut, honestly. Like, even though it would have been the right thing to do technically, if he was the killer, he probably wasn't a nice man. But who knows if even if he was. Now, I don't necessarily think he was, because like I said, there was a lot of, crime, like petty theft and things like that back in that day. So he was probably wasn't the only one stealing cars. And second of all, apparently they did do a long investigative, like months investigative on Swinney. And apparently they were both, Peggy and him, were sleeping in their car under a bridge near San Antonio when the Booker Martin murders occurred. So I don't think they did that, but who knows, right? I definitely, wouldn't rule them out. But everyone, that's like the main like person that everyone says they did it, they just couldn't prove it, right? Now, another one I find very interesting. There's actually quite a few suspects, but the other one that I find interesting was an actual suicide confession. Um, and it was by Henry Booker Duty Tennyson. So I guess he went by Duty. And he was just an 18-year-old freshman who unalived himself on November 4th, 1948. So about 2 years after the murders. And he left behind, so he would have been only 16 committing these murders. Keep in mind. So 16-year-olds, I've watched a lot of interrogations where 16-year-olds were the murderers, but keep in mind that fact as well. And he committed suicide, like I said, November 4th, 1948, leaving behind cryptic instructions which directed investigators to a note in which Tennyson confessed to the murders, but specifically not all the murders, but Starks, Martin, and Booker. So he did play in the same high school as Booker, but they didn't know each other. So they, I guess, were in band together. There was no evidence linking him to it. And then one of his friends provided an alibi for the night of the Starks murders, stating that they were playing cards when they heard the news of the attacks. So probably not him, but an interesting theory, right? And people could be just trying to defend their friend, right? Um, there's also like ideas of hitchhikers. There's ideas of German prisoners of war, because keep in mind this is right after World War II. Um, there's a lot. I'm not going to go into them all today, but we could. um, but let me see if I want to go through any more. One second. Okay, guys, we're going to talk about one more because this one was really weird. And honestly, like just off the bat, right? Like just not much information, just, from the little researching I've done, trying to introduce this case to myself and y'all, is there's a guy named Sammy, and it's a pseudonym, okay? So it's not even his real name. And apparently he had a really good reputation in Texarkana and everyone liked him. So he became a suspect though. And it's like people didn't want him to be a suspect, right? Because again, he had a good reputation. Everyone liked him. But apparently his vehicle's tire tracks were found across the road from Martin's corpse. Okay. So that's like as much physical evidence we're getting so far. Which, as a reminder, he Martin was part of the double murders, the second double murders. Um, so the third killing or the third attack. I'm sorry. Um, but instead of like really investigating it, they it's weird. Instead of really like they did a polygraph on him. He failed polygraph on him. So instead of like going from there, they get a hypnotist, and the psychiatrist hypnotizes him, named Travis Elliott, and then said he had no criminal tendencies and was like he just pulled off his vehicle because he had to pee before he had an affair with a married woman, and that's what he was hiding. And so they're like, all right, and they cleared him. Like, what the hell, bro? I was like with the police until this. Like, I don't know. I'm not saying Sammy did do it, but they didn't. There's so many suspects that have no pseudonyms. Even the kid that committed, unalived himself, they had no problem keeping his name on record. I don't know, bro. I want to look more into this because to me, that's like the most suspicious one. Like, and again, there's more. Um, but this was like the one that really caught my attention. I'll do a second part of this. Like I said, I want to go to some of the sites to do the actual supernatural side of this, which is like the main thing of my channel. And now that I have like a history with Buddy and know how he acts around things that are paranormal or supernatural versus just him being a dog, right, and just doing normal dog things, I feel like I'll get a good sense of what he's like smelling, what he's identifying, and things like that. So I'm gonna go do that. I think I'm just gonna stick to the Spring Lake area, and then I'll do like another like round of more research because I'm getting more and more into this. And that's just crazy to me. Like they literally just said, let's get a hypnotist, and he could just pretend to be hypnotized and be like, yes, I peed. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and that was the most evidence, right? And like no other witnesses or anything like that. Like, I don't know. Sammy boy, I don't know. I'm on to you. Yeah, so I think we're gonna leave it there. I'm very interested in this case and where it takes me. It's interesting how there's been quite a few. I'll talk about this in the next one, but there is quite a few people that tried to, like I said, like the one that unalived themselves, tried to be involved in the killing somehow. But I guess like that, this was like the big thing, right? This was like two movies were made out of it. One movie came out in like the 1970s, and then I guess they did the remake of it in 2014. And then obviously other movies and TV shows and things like that were inspired by it, with Lover's Lane and everything like that. So this was a crazy case. And I want to Google one other thing. Hang on, hold please. The one thing that I wanted to check was when they started, holding DNA to like, test later on. And they did start doing that in 1986, from my understanding. So yeah, this was years that they weren't gonna like keep it. But my thought almost went like, well, if they were trying to like cover up for Sammy Boy, like, maybe they were just like, oh, we're not gonna forget about doing the DNA or whatever. But that's not the case. So at least that's good. Um, but yeah, that's crazy, bro. Like, and I feel like in the 40s, like I don't know if they were and hypnotists, like that's something crazy. I'll have to like look into like, it just doesn't seem like a Texarkana thing to do, to rely on a hypnotist. It just doesn't, especially back in the 1940s, right? Their sheriffs were running this case, like, it seems weird for this case. So again, I'm not saying he did it, but they were sure protecting him because they didn't give his name out, right? So it's interesting. Um, all right. So I think next week I'm going to try and just stop by some areas that this case were involved. I am new to all this stuff, so I'm going to take Buddy. I'm going to see I'm going to rely on Buddy, right? Because and I might record some things and things like that, but I know Buddy is very in tune with the supernatural. You can go dig through my channel and have all my experiences with that. Buddy is my most reliable source. I'm going to use my most reliable source. And I know the difference between him being like interested in an animal, like that's, normal animal, versus him being like backing off and things. Like I know how he works now. You know what I mean? And so I'm going to see what he sees and what he acts like in these areas. And yeah, I'll probably take a little bit of footage. I'm not expecting anything crazy. I just am interested. I am new to like the more investigating part of things. I've certainly noticed a lot of things, but the investigative aspect is a little different for me. And then I'm going to do some more research and probably combine, what I find, visiting these areas, as well as more research on this, because the more I dig into it, the more I'm confused. But it's an interesting case. It's a sad case. Obviously, the families probably still live here that are involved with this case. So yeah, it's very interesting. It wasn't documented very well, so I do apologize if I got something wrong. But I would read one thing and then they'd be like, "No, that's stupid." And I'm like, "Okay, like it conflicting stuff, but I think we have the gist of, everything that happened. And that's the main goal I had for this episode, was to get the gist of things. Now, before we close this out, I am going to leave off with not one of my favorite topics, but if you know, for me, I don't like glitches. That's the side of supernaturals. I don't like them. They make me nervous because timelines make me nervous for plethora of reasons. We don't need to go through all that crap, but um I have been experiencing so many weird glitches as of late, like super weird glitches in the sense of things like, I don't even know. It's been like all week. Just weird things like people like showing my ID and then like getting feedback that my ID is not my birth date. And I don't want to get into too much information on that, because that was like, I just had to verify something, and then they were like, it was weird. It was like, and it happened like 3 times. It was weird. And then I had, which again could have just been a mistake, but it's kind of hard because it was just like the date of my ID. I don't know. Then so that happened, and it happened 3 times in a row. And then what else happened? Oh, okay. So today I turned down the air to like 70, right? It was like 73 or 74. I turned it down. And then later on, I came back and it went up all the way to 78. And no one else was in this house. And the thing just got fixed like not even like maybe 6 months ago. Like it should be working fine. Like the air's going through, and it went all the way up to 78. And I felt so bad for my dog, my because Buddy was sleeping in my room and had the air on, and so was Kitty. But the other pets, like, it's hot out, so like I turned it down even more. But like that happened, that was really weird. And like again, if all these things happen just like at like one time, like during a month period, like it's like whatever. But like this, it's like all happened all week, like. And then something, it was really weird. Our door to the front, like I was leaving and it was perfectly fine, and then I came back, and then like the handle was like backwards and flopping. I'll try and shoot a video for it and put it on my spooky things. We're getting a new one to replace it. It still locks, but the handle just like it was screwed in tight. Like it was screwed in super tight, and all of a sudden the handle just like was flopped over and like backwards and like not working. And it was I went to take Buddy out, and then I come back in and I'm like, the door's broken. It was super weird. Like no one bashed it. No, it just was like backwards and broken. And I'm like, how? And I don't know how to describe to explain it backwards, but it was just like flopping over. And I'm like, again, it's an older thing, but handle. But at the same time, it probably needs to be replaced. But at the same time, it was like I literally just left the house and I came back and it was broken. And I know people aren't going to believe me when I add this to it, but Buddy's been looking up a lot at our door lately, especially when he's outside. And I said this many times, this has been documented. He doesn't like to leave the house sometimes. And he's been staring up on the door. And I thought it was just bugs. You know what I mean? So I didn't document it. That's the reason. I was like, oh, he just sees like, bugs like to fly up there and stuff like that. It's hot. We get stuff like there. I thought he was just looking at that. And now I'm thinking, like, I don't, is there something at the door? I don't know, because that was really weird. Like, because the door was fine, I left, it came back, the door was busted. I'm like, this happened Sunday, I believe, Sunday or Saturday, and I was like, what? And then like, I don't know, like those are like the main things where I'm just like, it could just all just be technology glitches. And the door just decided to be like, I had it. Like, I don't know. But that was weird, okay? And like, you can believe me with the Buddy thing or not. Again, I didn't document him staring at the door a lot. I documented him staring at walls and stuff. I just did it because I literally just thought he was looking at a bug that I didn't see, right? Because I try and be somewhat realistic in my journey, right? So those are the major updates. I'm gonna go eat dinner and then hang out with Kermie for a little bit and uh uh try and play a little bit of Killer Frequency. Can put the second one out, and I'm really enjoying playing that. So that should be out soon. But I hope everyone's doing well. Other than that, thank you for listening. And I will keep you. If my next haunted journal isn't the second part of the Moonlight Killer series, I will keep you updated on that one to see how it goes. I just don't know when I'm gonna have time to go there and do an investigation with Buddy, but I will keep you updated. Okay. All right. Thank you for listening. And as always, stay curious and stay tuned into the supernatural. Thanks for watching.